Spider-Man has always been powerful, but what happens when that isn't enough? Give Peter Parker Sukuna's cursed power, Gojo's Six Size and Limitless, turn him into a Viltrumite, or give him the symbiote before Thanos ever reaches Earth. Each one makes Spider-Man stronger than he was ever supposed to be, but more power doesn't always mean a better ending. So across 4 completely different timelines, we're answering one question: what if Spider-Man became too powerful? Somewhere in Queens, a 15-year-old is swinging through freezing rain at midnight, and tonight, something from a completely different universe is about to end up inside of him. A fragment of Ryuman Sukuna, the most dangerous cursed spirit in human history. Yuji Itadori survived eating one of those fingers because his body was built for it. Generations of dark sorcery made him a cage, but Peter Parker wasn't. He has no idea what he just swallowed. Today, we're gonna find out what that will cost him. We place this divergence slowly after the events of Spider-Man Homecoming. Peter's around 15. He recently turned down Tony's offer. He's back in Queens, still figuring out what kind of hero he actually wants to be. The artifact arrives in New York through a series of careless mistakes. A corrupt jujutsu sorcerer in Japan's underground secured one of the 20 fingers during an illegal transfer. The higher-ups were too busy with internal political struggles to notice the gap in the security grid. The sorcerer slipped through the cracks. He knew they'd execute him the second they found out, so he smuggled the finger onto a cargo ship bound for the United States. Cursed energy scrambles over open ocean water, which meant traditional monitoring systems couldn't track the object once it left Japanese jurisdiction. The American criminals receiving the shipment only cared about acquiring something rare and ancient. To them, the finger was just another artifact that eccentric billionaires and corrupt collectors pay millions to own. They noticed it emitted a strange frequency on their scanning equipment, which only drove the price up. They viewed it as dangerous purely because of its price tag, remaining completely oblivious to its true nature. Now, in this timeline, the JJK universe and the MCU take place in the same place. Peter's nearby because of a police scanner tip. He spent the evening swinging through the freezing rain, bored, waiting for something to happen. The scanners stay quiet for hours until it scrambled. Frantic transmission mentions a high-stakes exchange at Brooklyn Navy Yard. He swings down and webs the smuggler to a shipping container. The smuggler's panic sparks a shootout between the buyers and the sellers. A stray bullet shatters the wooden box containing the artifact. The immediate release of concentrated cursed energy acts like a beacon in the night. A cursed spirit manifests from the shadows, drawn to the exposed finger. It's a grotesque amalgamation of twisted limbs and teeth. Peter can't see it. He perceives only shipping containers denting and civilians flying backwards through the air as if they've been hit by an invisible truck. The unseen entity tears through the docks. It rips steel doors off their hinges and tosses armed men into the freezing water as if they're weightless. The criminals fire their weapons blindly into the dark. Their bullets pass right through the spirit, hitting nothing but concrete. Peter relies entirely on his spider sense. It reacts every time the invisible monster moves, giving them the shape of the threat even if his eyes can't comprehend the source. He tries to fight back. He throws a punch at the empty space where his instincts tell him the monster is standing. His fist passes straight through it. Without cursed energy, his physical attacks mean nothing. The spirit grabs a civilian. Peter gets pinned under a crushed shipping container, struggling to lift the metal off his back. He notices the preserved, mummified finger rolling across the pavement. His spider sense screams at him, treating the finger as the threat. He puts the timeline together fast. The monster appeared the exact moment the box broke. The finger must be the source. In a desperate decision to keep it away from the rampaging spirit, Peter shoots a web, yanks the finger into his hand, and swallows it whole. Pure instinct. He's hoping to conceal the artifact from the monster. He has no idea he just consumed a fragment of Sukuna himself. But before we can understand what that means for Peter, we have to understand why it should have killed him. When Yuji Itadori ate the finger, he survived because his body was specifically built to be a vessel. Kenjaku engineered his lineage across generations precisely for that purpose. The biology was already there. Peter Parker has none of that. The moment the finger slides down his throat, a surge of foreign energy erupts inside of him. For a normal human, consuming a cursed object causes immense physical trauma and instant death. Peter collapses on the docks. Black markings flash across his skin. 2 extra eyes open beneath his own. Sukuna looks out at the New York skyline. He smiles, ready to massacre the dock workers and explore the strange new environment. He tries to lift Peter's arm to summon a cursed technique, but the muscles refuse to move. Peter's body survives the connection because a spider bite changed more than his strength and his reflexes. It changed his biology at a level that creates an unusual compatibility, something nobody, including Peter, could have predicted. His body doesn't just accept the energy, it resists it. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough. Peter forces the extra eyes shut, locking Sukuna away before the demon can take his first step in the real world. Peter wakes up gasping on the cold pavement. The cursed spirit is gone, exorcised by the shockwave of Sukuna's brief manifestation. The surviving dock workers run for their lives. Peter lies there in the freezing rain, staring up at the dock lights. He's alive, but something is already scratching at the walls inside of his head, and it is patient, furious, and very, very old. The first night, Peter can almost convince himself is just the adrenaline. His spider senses never worked like this before. A low, constant vibration at the base of his skull, not spiking towards any specific threat, just humming. It's quiet enough that he can talk himself out of it. He's exhausted. He's coming down from the fight. It'll pass. By the third night, he can't sleep. The hum doesn't stop. It's there when he closes his eyes, and there when he opens them. A biological alarm that his own body is running because something dangerous shares it with him. He sits in his bedroom at 3 in the morning, holding his head in his hands, trying not to let Aunt May hear him through the walls. He starts avoiding her, skipping dinners, leaving before she wakes up, and coming back through the window late at night. May notices anyway. His bloodshot eyes, his pale skin. She asks if he's coming down with a fever, over. Peter lies, says it's a chem exam, and he hates lying to her. He just can't explain that something ancient is living in his skull and laughing at him. He turns to the internet, old forums, strange websites, anything about cursed objects, mummified fingers, and ancient legends. He finds nothing real, just fabricated stories and internet rumors. Nothing that explains the voice. In his most desperate moments, he starts wondering if it's just in his head. Maybe the mutation changed his brain chemistry. Maybe this is some kind of psychosis. He tests it. He demands out loud that whatever's inside him identify itself. And that's when the walls between them stop being theoretical. He doesn't get an answer. He gets a presence. Something dark and enormous pushing back against his thoughts, filled with quiet amusement. Peter finally understands how badly he miscalculated. At school, Ned notices that he's different. Peter freezes mid-conversation. He loses focus. He reacts to things nobody else can see. During a math test, Ned watches him grip his pencil until it snaps in half. Peter just stares at the broken pieces, realizing he doesn't feel it happen. The strength wasn't his. When Ned asks what's wrong, Peter shakes his head. He's already running the calculations of who he can tell. If he tells Tony Stark, Tony might stop seeing him as a kid who needs help. He might see him as a dangerous weapon and lock him somewhere. If he tells Ned, he puts his best friend in danger. So Peter keeps it to himself. And that isolation is exactly what Sukuna has been waiting for. You see, Sukuna is patient, and he knows how to use what he finds. He's been through thousands of years of jujutsu history. He knows how to dismantle someone. And Peter, alone in his bedroom at 4 in the morning, is the easiest target he's ever had. He starts with the small things. When Peter stops a mugger and webs him to a streetlight for the police, Sukuna points out, calmly and pleasantly, that the man will probably be released in 48 hours and hurt someone again. He tells Peter he could fix the problem forever. All Peter has to do is give him control for a few seconds. Peter refuses. He swings away. But the voice keeps talking. It moves through Peter's memories like it owns them. The voice finds Tony Stark. It creates a version of Tony looking at Peter with pure quiet disappointment. Peter sees it like a walking dream. Tony tells him that he was never ready, that he failed, that he was just a kid pretending. By then, Peter's defenses have been wearing thin for weeks. The insomnia has cost him. The isolation has cost him. The constant hum has cost him. He's been fighting to hold something back every hour of every day, and there's less of him left to do the fighting with each morning. So when Sukuna finally turns to Aunt May, Peter doesn't have the walls to stop it. Peter sits in the dark of his bedroom, hands shaking, knowing he's losing a war that nobody else can see. Sukuna has taken everything that matters to him and turned it into a weapon. The spider sense, May, Ned, Tony, everything he loves has become a way in, and he can't keep running from the thing inside of him. That's what Sukuna wants. For Peter to keep hiding, keep losing sleep, keep shrinking. If he doesn't figure out what he's actually carrying, it's going to take him apart piece by piece from the inside, so he has to understand it. Peter makes a decision, alone at 5 in the morning, sitting on the roof of his apartment building in the dark. He's been treating the energy inside of him like a disease, like something to lock away and never look at, and it's been destroying him, because you can't fight something you refuse to acknowledge. He doesn't want to understand it because he thinks it will help him. He wants to understand it because he's terrified of what happens if he doesn't. So he starts carefully, just paying attention. During a street patrol, he watches a dark aura that flickers around his fist when his emotion spikes. He notices that Sukuna doesn't rush to exploit it. He just watches. Like Sukuna is curious too. Peter starts cataloging what he feels, what the energy responds to, what makes it spike, and what makes it settle. He doesn't tell Sukuna what he's doing. He doesn't need to. Sukuna already knows. What Sukuna doesn't expect is that Peter keeping his eyes open changes the balance between them. A threat that you're actively watching doesn't have the same power as one that you're hiding from. Peter isn't beating Sukuna. He's not even close. But for the first time since the docks, he stops purely reacting. Peter starts paying attention. And somewhere in the city, a massive burst of uncontrolled cursed energy shows up. It's carrying Sukuna's unmistakable signature, but we'll get to that soon. Consuming the finger forces Peter's body to adapt to cursed energy over time. The invisible world that exists alongside the normal one begins coming into focus. Gross spirits cling to subway ceilings. Things start crawling over bridges in the dark. Peter can see them now. He's not sure if it's better or worse. His guilt and grief turn out to be a massive reservoir for cursed energy. His anxiety over the people he loves dying, like Aunt May and Ned, and his fear of failing Tony Stark. All of it feeds the power. The problem is that having energy doesn't mean knowing how to use it. He tests it during a street-level fight with the local gang using salvaged Chitauri weapons. He throws a punch. His grief briefly manifests as a dark aura around his fist. The impact sends a mercenary through a solid brick wall. He can channel the anxiety into physical force, but the output is completely unstable. The defensive applications he discovers by accident. Spider Sense gives him warning before an impact lands. Over time, he learns to direct cursed energy towards the threatened area almost automatically. If someone swings a metal pipe at his ribs, his instincts push a surge of energy into that specific spot right before contact. It doesn't make him invulnerable, but he starts surviving encounters that should break his bones. He's still completely alone with this. He still has no language for what's happening to him, no framework, no idea that there's people in the world who've been dealing with exactly this for their entire lives. That changes one night on a rainy rooftop in Queens. He spots a tall man standing near the edge of the building, wearing a blindfold, as if standing 6 stories above the street in the rain is completely ordinary. The moment Peter sees him, his spider sense doesn't strike. It floods. Every warning system he has fires simultaneously. This man is more dangerous than anyone Peter has ever been in the same room with. The tall man removes his blindfold. He uses his 6 eyes to examine Peter for a long moment. Then something shifts in his expression. Gojo throws an earpiece to Peter. Peter catches it and puts it in his ear. "Can you hear this?" Gojo asks. Peter responds yes, nervous and afraid. The earpiece is an auto-translator. No matter what language someone speaks, if you're wearing this earpiece, it auto-translates to your core language. finish. You're holding him, the man says. It's not a question. Peter keeps his distance. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. The man tilts his head slightly. You've known for weeks. You just don't know what you're holding. Gojo explains it in pieces, and Peter's reaction breaks it apart before he can finish. He starts with cursed energy, negative emotion accumulating in the world and taking physical form. Peter's face goes through something complicated, because that description makes perfect sense. Gojo explains cursed objects. Objects saturated with cursed energy from someone powerful enough that the energy persists after death. Peter interrupts. The finger. He's already putting it together. Gojo nods. Then he says a name. Ryumin Sukuna, a sorcerer who lived over 1,000 years ago. The most powerful cursed spirit in recorded history. 20 fingers. 20 cursed objects scattered across the world. And Peter only has 5% of his power. Peter sits down on the edge of the rooftop. He pulls his mask off. At this point, he's still a naive kid. He stares at his hands for a long moment. Gojo tells Peter about Yuji, a teenager who was forced into the same vessel role, who survived it because he refused to let Sukuna own what he did, who kept choosing, every single day, to remain himself. Then, Gojo offers to help. Over the following weeks, Gojo makes trips to New York and trains Peter in abandoned buildings around the city. He teaches him that cursed energy isn't just about output, it's about precision. Peter can't rely on his emotions flooding the system. He has to learn to focus and direct the energy, or it'll keep directing him. During one training session, Peter tries to hit Gojo's infinity. He focuses everything, his frustration, his exhaustion, his specific fear about Tony Stark, and watches Gojo's movements, waiting for the exact alignment of energy and timing. For a split second, everything lines up. A flash of black lightning explodes from Peter's fist. The shockwave shakes the entire warehouse. Peter steps back and stares at his hand, genuinely confused. Gojo smiles, because he understands something Peter doesn't yet. Peter isn't just a vessel. He has an extraordinary talent for this. Peter learns to apply cursed energy to his web shooters. The webs become strong enough to hold cursed spirits. For the first time since the Brooklyn Navy Yard, Peter can fight both the visible threats in a city and the invisible ones crawling through the dark spaces between them. The midpoint of the story isn't a battle. It's this moment on a rooftop in the rain, when Peter stops reacting and starts taking charge. The years between that rooftop and the events of Infinity War don't pass cleanly. They pass the way difficult things do, in increments, with setbacks, with nights that are better than the one before, and nights that are much worse. One specific night, about 2 years after Gojo's first visit, Peter is sitting on a fire escape in the rain after a patrol that went badly. He's got a cracked rib that's already starting to heal. He's thinking about May. He's thinking about MJ. He's thinking about a civilian he got to in time and one he didn't. Inside his head, Sukuna is quiet, still watching. Peter realizes, sitting there in the rain, that him and Sukuna have been learning each other for 2 years. He knows the shape of Sukuna's patience. He knows the way the presence at the back of his skull changes when Sukuna is genuinely interested versus simply waiting. He knows the difference between a probe and an attack. And Sukuna, for all his contempt for Peter's choices, has learned that this vessel does not break the way he expected. They've reached kind of a standoff. It's not really peace, but it's something they both understand. Peter is managing it well when the Black Order drops into New York and the world becomes something completely different. The events of Infinity War pull Peter into a battle at a scale he's never operated at before. He joins Tony Stark and Doctor Strange. He ends up on the ship, and for Sukuna, who has spent years slowly mapping the geography of Peter's relationships and fears, this is a nightmare of a different kind. The ship is pulling him off Earth, away from the remaining fingers that can restore his full power, away from everything he understands. He's being carried across the universe inside a teenager, and he can't do anything about it. His fury is almost physical inside Peter's head. But when they arrive on Titan, and Sukuna finally sees Thanos, really sees him, not through a screen, the fury shifts into something else. Thanos isn't a normal opponent. He's someone who has built his entire existence around the acquisition of absolute power. He believes his strength gives him the right to determine the fate of every living thing. Sukuna recognizes that immediately. He sees a conqueror, an equal, and after years trapped inside a teenager who stops muggers and worries about his aunt, finally something interesting. The Battle of Titan begins. Peter uses everything he's learned, his enhanced speed, spider sense, cursed energy reinforcement, and cursed energy enhanced webbing to slow Thanos down. For a moment, he's actually contributing, but Thanos has been fighting for thousands of years. He adapts faster than Peter can adjust. While this is happening, Tony is staring at Peter, shocked at his new powers. Thanos catches Peter mid-swing, slams him into the ground hard enough to crack the surface under him, and starts punching him. Every hit fades Peter's vision a little more. His thoughts slow down, and the control he spent years building starts developing cracks. Peter's connection to Sukuna has always run on willpower. As long as Peter is focused, he can keep the King of Curses locked away, but his body is getting beaten beyond what it can quickly compensate for, and his mind is exhausting itself trying to maintain everything at once. The defenses are weakening. Sukuna notices. After years of watching and waiting, he finds the opening. Peter's body stops moving like its own. The suit stretches as the muscles tense and expand. Dark markings spread across his skin. The familiar tattoos of Sukuna appear across his face and arms. The extra eyes open. Tony and the others immediately understand something is wrong. The body is Peter's, but nothing else is. Thanos looks across the battlefield and sees something completely different from the teenager he was just beating down. Sukuna doesn't waste time. He uses Peter's speed to move around the Power Stone blasts and close the distance. He raises 2 fingers, dismantle. An invisible slash cuts through the air and strikes Thanos directly. A deep cut opens across his chest. This isn't strength-based. It's a technique Thanos has never encountered. He doesn't have a framework for it. Sukuna follows immediately with Cleave, placing his hand against the arm holding the Infinity Gauntlet and attempting to cut through the armor, all to separate the gauntlet from its owner. Thanos reacts instantly with the Reality Stone. The ground beneath Sukuna Sukuna loses its solid form, destroying his balance and breaking the attack. Before Sukuna can recover, the Power Stone punch sends him through the wreckage of the destroyed spaceship. Most people would be done. Sukuna stands back up and wipes the blood from his face. He starts to prepare domain expansion, Malevolent Shrine. He doesn't care who gets caught inside of it. Iron Man, Doctor Strange, the Guardians. None of it matters. He wants to prove his power against someone who can actually receive it. He wants to see if Thanos is actually interesting. And then Peter stops in. Not from outside, from inside. Remember, this is only 5% Sukuna. From somewhere deep in his own exhausted, half-conscious mind, Peter sees what Sukuna is about to do. He knows what happens inside his domain. Everyone around them will die. Tony, Strange, everyone. And that thought, Tony, is enough. Peter fights. He forces his way forward against Sukuna's control from the inside, pushing back against the technique before Sukuna can complete it. Sukuna fights to hold him down. Peter refuses. Slowly, degree by degree, the tattoos start fading. The extra eyes close. Sukuna is pushed back into his cage. Peter falls to the ground, barely conscious, coughing blood. Thanos looks at him in confusion. The terrifying presence is simply gone, replaced by the same battered teenager from before. It doesn't change the outcome. The heroes lose. The final stone goes to Thanos. The snap happens. Peter watches his body turn to dust. In his mind, Sukuna also disappears. Then, when Peter comes back during Endgame, Sukuna comes back with him. And now he's more furious than he has ever been in his existence. We move forward to No Way Home, and this is the moment Sukuna has been waiting for. Peter is about to face the worst night of his life, and he's been wearing down for years. Sukuna learns something back on Titan. The only thing that can stop him from taking over completely is Peter's concentrated willpower. When Peter is at full capacity, the cage holds perfectly. When Peter is injured, exhausted, or emotionally overwhelmed, the cage develops gaps. The closest Sukuna ever came to freedom before Titan was Peter's worst nights of insomnia in the early days. On Titan, it was physical damage that opened the gap. Then, in Far From Home, when Peter was fighting Mysterio, Sukuna almost came out. After all of that, Peter still woke up in cold sweats after the battle, sometimes seeing Sukuna's domain half constructed in his mind before he could force it back down. The memory of what almost happened, everyone dying inside Malevolent Shrine, Tony and Strange included, was the most terrifying thing he's experienced in years. And he carries this into No Way Home. It sits in the back of his mind as he works on the cure for the villains, as he hides them in Happy's apartment, as he tries, stubbornly, and completely in the face of common sense, to save people who have hurt so many others. Sukuna finds Peter's plan pathetic. He says so regularly. He doesn't understand mercy as a concept. Weakness should be punished, not forgiven. He repeats this every time Peter considers how to approach Norman Osborn. Peter ignores him. Then, the Green Goblin surfaces, and the building fight becomes brutal fast. The Green Goblin is stronger than Peter is ready for. He throws Peter through floors, through walls. He laughs. He attacks again and again, specifically targeting the belief that mercy is strength, trying to prove it's nothing but a failure mode. Inside Peter's mind, Sukuna watches the whole thing. He enjoys it. He keeps pointing out that this is what happens when you try to save monsters. Then the pumpkin bomb happens. May catches a blast. Peter gets her out. He helps her stand. For a moment, one genuinely awful moment, he thinks she's going to be okay, but she's not. She looks at him, and she says a line that has guided every version of Spider-Man. With great power, there must also come great responsibility. And then she closes her eyes. Everything inside Peter breaks. In the OG story, Peter's grief turns outward immediately, into anger, into revenge, into the need to make Norman pay. He's still himself in that grief. He's still in control of himself. This time is different, because Peter hasn't just lost May. He's been fighting Sukuna for years. Every time he felt rage, he had to force it down before Sukuna could use it as a door. Every time he felt hopeless, like when Tony Stark died, he had to push it away. He has been managing his own psychology as a tactical necessity for years, and now, the person he loves most is dead in his arms on a cold floor, and he has nothing left to manage it with. Sukuna has been getting stronger too. As Peter's connection to cursed energy deepened, so did Sukuna's connection to him. The cage is older now. It's had stress fractures developing for years in the moments Peter couldn't see. Peter looks up and thinks about the Green Goblin. One unguarded human exhausted moment, he doesn't want to cure him. He wants to make him suffer. He wants revenge. That single thought is enough. The walls come down. Peter's hands slip away from May's. He stands up slowly. Dark markings spread across his face and neck. Black tattoos cover his skin. The extra eyes open. Sukuna looks out at the rain. He stretches Peter's arms and feels the air against his skin. After years of fighting through the cage, he can finally move. He looks down at May's body without guilt, without grief, seeing only the moment of weakness that finally set him free. Then he hears police sirens. He turns towards the city. For years, New York has been protected by Spider-Man, but Spider-Man isn't here anymore. The final battle at the Statue of Liberty is supposed to be about saving people. Peter's plan was simple: cure the villains, send them home, nobody has to die. But Peter's plan belongs to Peter, and Sukuna doesn't care about Peter's plan. Now it's a fight for survival. Toby and Andrew arrive through Ned's portals, expecting to find a younger version of themselves who needs help. Instead, they find Sukuna standing on the scaffolding in a red and blue suit, the dark markings across his face, the extra eyes, the complete absence of the specific kind of tension that a nervous teenager carries in his body. They look at each other. They understand immediately that something is very wrong. Electro attacks first. Max floats above the scaffolding, pulling power from the arc reactor, electricity covering his body. Sukuna watches him for a moment, specifically watches him, the way someone watches a problem they're about to solve instantly, and then sends cursed energy directly into Electro's form. Unlike a physical attack, the energy can reach him in his electrical state. It breaks apart the energy holding his body together. Max loses control and falls from the air. Sandman is next. Flint forms a massive massive fist and swings it towards Sukuna. Thousands of pounds of sand compressed into a single impact. Sukuna doesn't move. He releases a series of dismantle attacks, invisible slashes cutting through the fist, sand exploding in every direction across the scaffolding. The attacks can't kill Sandman. His body always comes back together. But Sukuna spreads the sand so far, so fast, that Flint can't reform quickly enough to re-enter the fight. Toby and Andrew have seen enough. They move in together. They don't want to hurt Peter. They want to reach him. They use their experience to trap and slow Sukuna down. They call out to Peter while they fight. They remind him about MJ, about Ned. They try to give him a reason to push back from the inside. Sukuna laughs and keeps moving. Because he has access to Peter's spider sense, he feels every attack before it arrives. Every web, every punch, every trap. He knows where Toby and Andrew are going before they move. He cuts through their web lines with dismantle, forcing them to change direction mid-air. He strengthens Peter's webs with cursed energy and fires them at Toby, wrapping him and pulling him directly into a punch that sends him into the metal scaffolding. He feels Andrew coming from behind and turns at the last second, throwing him into a structural support. Both of them are hurt, but neither of them stop. In the background, MJ and Ned are watching, absolutely appalled by what Peter is doing. Everyone knows Peter is still in there. They just don't know where he went. Then, the Green Goblin arrives. Norman flies in on the glider, carrying another pumpkin bomb, laughing. He thinks he's about to fight the same teenager he beat down in the apartment. Sukuna looks up at him. He sees a man wearing a mask and calling himself a monster. He sees someone who thinks cruelty is power, who hides behind a personality he has built to justify his damage. Compared to Sukuna, the Green Goblin is a child's idea of something scary. Sukuna launches himself from the scaffolding using Peter's strength. He gets directly above the glider and activates Cleave. His hand makes contact with one of the metal wings. The metal begins splitting apart. The glider breaks. Norman crashes onto the platform. For the first time in a long time, Norman Osborn is genuinely afraid. He looks up at the figure walking towards them. Peter would be hesitating right now. Peter would be angry, conflicted, barely holding it together. Whatever is standing in front of him doesn't have any of that. Sukuna raises his hand. Deep inside the innate domain, Peter is watching. The domain is built from water and dark space and things Peter doesn't have words for. It's not a metaphor. It has texture. The water is cold against his legs where he's sitting. The darkness has weight. The mental space that Sukuna has occupied for years is not abstract. It has architecture. Peter sits in the water and watches through Sukuna's eyes as a hand rises above Norman Osborn. He's been down here before. Every time Sukuna gets close to the surface, Peter ends up somewhere in this space, finding his way back through grief or exhaustion or rage. He knows the geography. He knows what it costs to move. Sukuna replays May's death again. He's been doing it since the moment he took control, using it to keep Peter subdued in the lowest corner of his domain. He heads Tony. He stacks the grief until the weight of it is almost physical, until Peter's will is being crushed by the accumulated mass of every loss he's ever carried. Peter thinks about May's last words. He doesn't push the grief away. He stops fighting. He accepts it, that she's gone, that he's furious and heartbroken and exhausted, that he might carry this particular wound for the rest of his life. He lets all of it be true at the same time, and then he stands up. The water around him reacts to the shift. The surface of it ripples outward from where he's standing, in every direction. The darkness at the edge of the domain pulls back slightly. Sukuna's hand freezes in the air above Norman. His arm begins to shake. From outside, Toby, Andrew, MJ, and Ned watch Peter's posture change. Sukuna throws every weight he has back into the domain. He tries to force Peter back down into the grief, back into the cold water, back into the helplessness. He pushes with years of accumulated leverage. Every memory he's touched, every wound he's reopened, every false image of Tony and May he's constructed. Peter pushes back. He doesn't have to destroy Sukuna. He never did. He just has to be there, in his own body, long enough to stop one specific thing from happening. Peter forces his way to the surface. The black markings fade from his skin. The remaining extra eyes close. Peter drops to his knees on the scaffolding, gasping, holding his chest completely spent. He's back. He takes out the cure. Toby and Andrew move towards him slowly. Peter looks up at them, exhausted, hurt, fully himself, and then looks at Norman lying on the ground. He doesn't attack him. He takes out the cure. He crosses to Norman. He injects it. The goblin persona breaks apart. Norman Osborn, frightened and confused and far from home, looks up at Peter and doesn't understand why he's still alive. Peter made a choice. He chose mercy in the exact moment Sukuna was trying to choose otherwise. He denied the King of Curses the violence he'd waited years to take. Inside the domain, Sukuna registers what just happened. He sits in the dark water and acknowledges, for the first time, that he severely underestimated this particular vessel. But what if instead of consuming the power of Jujutsu's greatest curse, Peter inherited the abilities of its strongest sorcerer? Satoru Gojo cannot be touched. Not in theory. Literally, physically, at the atomic level. Nothing in existence can reach him. That is what the Six Eyes and Limitless technique do. They do not make you stronger, they make you untouchable. Now give that to Peter Parker. Not a version of Peter who doesn't get hurt anymore. The exact same Peter. The one whose entire identity is built on absorbing punishment, losing people he loves, and pushing through when no one else can. But now nothing, nowhere, ever touches him again. Your brain ignites. Thermal radiation off every bolt in the scaffolding. Kinetic energy of the multiversal rifts tearing open above the Statue of Liberty. Your spider sense isn't giving you half a second of warning anymore. It's showing you the atomic reality of the universe all at once. And your teenage brain is absolutely screaming, trying to keep up. To make this crossover work perfectly within the established MCU continuity, we have to look at the exact moment Peter gains these abilities. We're not gonna assume he was born with them. We're tying this directly to the multiversal chaos of Spider-Man No Way Home. The scene is the Statue of Liberty. The Green Goblin has just thrown a pumpkin bomb into a box containing Doctor Strange's corrupted spell. The box explodes explodes. The fabric of reality physically tears open, revealing purple rifts in the sky. The multiverse is bleeding into Peter's world. But in this timeline, it isn't just silhouette variants of classic villains trying to slip through the cracks. The structural rules of different universes also bleed over. As Peter stands on the scaffolding, trying to figure out how to stop the sky from collapsing, a surge of multiversal cursed energy strikes him directly. In the Jujutsu Kaisen universe, this size is a genetic anomaly bound to fate. It appears when the world desperately needs balance. Here, the multiversal tear recognizes Peter's spider sense as an advanced spatial awareness technique. The cosmic energy latches onto his DNA and rewrites his biology to balance a massive influx of multiversal threats. The moment the energy strikes him, Peter collapses. He doesn't feel a normal jolt of pain. He feels his brain physically expanding. The Six Eyes aren't just a cool visual upgrade. They're a massive influx of information. For a normal human, receiving the Six Eyes would instantly cause brain death. The human mind simply isn't built to process the world at an atomic level. But Peter Parker isn't a normal human. He's a science prodigy with enhanced biology that's already operating beyond the limits of standard human neurology. The Six Eyes finds a compatible host. When Peter opens his eyes, he doesn't just see the scaffolding anymore. He sees the thermal radiation coming off the metal. He sees the microscopic dust particles floating in the air. He can calculate the mass, speed, and trajectory of every single object in a 5-mile radius simultaneously. His spider sense used to give him just a brief warning when danger was near. Now, combined with the Six Eyes, his brain is calculating the reality of the entire universe every single second. Doctor Strange floats down next to him, struggling to contain the spell. In the original timeline, this is where Peter tells Strange to cast a new spell, making the entire world forget Peter Parker exists. But in this timeline, Peter's newly awakened brain processes the magical tear on a quantum level. "Don't erase me!" Peter screams. "The structural integrity is failing at the dimensional anchors. Close the loop, Strange! Close the loop!" Strange is shocked that a teenager just solved a multi-dimensional equation in real time, but he doesn't have time to argue. Strange weaves the magic exactly as Peter instructs. The spell fires, the multiversal variants are sent home, and the glowing rift snaps shut. The world is saved, and most importantly, the memory wipe never happens. The next few days are absolute agony for Peter. He isolates himself completely. The grief of losing Aunt May is suffocating, but it's competing with the physical torture happening inside his own skull. Every time he opens his eyes, the sensory overload causes his nose to bleed. He can't look out a window without processing the chemical composition of the smog in the air. He can't look at a TV without seeing the exact frequency of the light waves. He realizes that if he doesn't figure out a way to filter this information, his brain will literally melt from the processing demands. But because he's a science prodigy, he understands he needs to drastically reduce the optical input immediately. He crawls over to his messy workbench, keeping his eyes squeezed shut to block out the overwhelming data stream. He grabs a roll of electrical tape and some welding goggles he uses for building web shooters. He layers it over his eyes, tying a makeshift blindfold around his head. Instantly, the headache drops from a 10 down to a 4. With the thick blindfold on, he can still see perfectly. The Six Eyes allows him to perceive the physical world through the flow of energy and mass. The blindfold acts as a filter, lowering the resolution of the universe so his teenage brain can actually process it without frying itself. He sits on the edge of his bed. He looks at his hands. He can see the exact cellular structure of his skin. He can feel the strange new energy pooling in his stomach. This is cursed energy, though Peter just thinks of it as a new biological power source. Over the next few weeks, Peter's entire daily routine changes. He has to redesign his Spider-Man suit. The eye lenses are gone. He replaces them with armored lenses that let zero light in. When he walks around as Peter Parker in his daily life, he has to wear dark sunglasses indoors. He tells everyone he has a severe medical sensitivity to light caused by a chemical accident. He has to navigate a world that knows his secret identity. Paparazzi follow him. People stare at him on the street, but because of his new sensory processing, it doesn't overwhelm him the way it used to. He can tune them out. He finally meets up with Ned and MJ at a quiet coffee shop. "Dude, you're wearing sunglasses inside," Ned whispers, leaning across the table and looking around to make sure nobody's listening to them. "You look like a blind secret agent. Are you okay? The news hasn't stopped talking about you since the statue." Peter just smiles. "It's a migraine thing, Ned. Trust me, I can see you perfectly." And he really can. He can see the steam rising from Ned's hot chocolate. He can hear the exact heartbeat of every customer in the room. He knows that MJ is anxious because he can see her kinetic micro-expressions and the slight spike in her body temperature, but he still doesn't fully understand what he's carrying yet. The real education is about to start. The discovery of the limitless technique happens entirely by accident. It's late at night. Peter spots a group of armed criminals sprinting out of a bank in downtown Manhattan. They're carrying heavy duffel bags filled with cash and repurposed damage control assault rifles that fire heavy energy rounds. Peter drops down into the alleyway, blocking their escape path. "Alright guys, I know banking hours are confusing, but withdrawals usually require an ATM card, not an energy rifle." The robbers don't laugh. The leader panics, raises his rifle, and holds down the trigger. Normally, Peter's spider sense would force his body to flip backwards immediately, but this time, his brain doesn't tell him to move. The Six Eyes instantly calculates the velocity of the energy blast, the mass of the projectiles, and the distance between the gun and his chest. And then, his new cursed energy acts on instinct. Peter stands completely still. He doesn't flinch. The energy rounds fly towards him at supersonic speeds, but as they get close to his chest, they start to slow down. The closer they get to his suit, the slower they move. It looks like they're hitting an invisible wall of thick gelatin. When they're a millimeter away from the fabric of his suit, the energy blast stops in midair, frozen in space. The robbers stop shooting. Their jaw drops in horror. Peter looks down at his own chest. He sees the glowing hot energy rounds floating harmlessly in front of him. Because Peter is a science prodigy, his mind understands what is happening. He remembers learning about the paradox of Achilles and the tortoise in his physics class. In order for an object to reach a destination, it first has to travel half the distance. Then it has to travel half the remaining distance. Then half of that. If you keep dividing the distance infinitely, the object never actually arrives. Somehow his body is projecting that paradox into the physical world. He has created a literal shield of infinity around him. He casually reaches out and plucks one of the floating energy rounds from the air. Okay, nope, that's impossible. I definitely didn't study for this. The robbers drop their guns and run away. They don't even try to fight. They just watched him stop a wall of energy with his mind. Peter easily webs them to a lamppost. He realizes the fundamental rule of his entire life has just been shattered. He doesn't have to dodge anymore. It's physically impossible for anything to touch him without his permission. The true impact of the limitless technique becomes obvious when Peter starts facing his classic rogue gallery. For years, Peter's villains relied on overwhelming physical force. Characters like the Rhino, the Shocker, and the Scorpion built their entire identities around being bigger, stronger, and more brutal than Spider-Man. They expected him to bounce around, get tired, and eventually make a mistake so they could crush him. When you introduce Gojo's Infinity Shield to Marvel villains, you break their reality. Let's look at a fight against Matt Gargan, the Scorpion. Gargan escapes from prison and meets up with Phineas Mason, the Tinkerer. Mason builds Gargan a new mechanical tail, constructed from salvaged damage control technology and stolen Stark armor plating. Gargan goes on a rampage through the financial district, destroying cars and screaming for Peter Parker to show his face, knowing full well who's under the mask. Peter drops down onto the street, standing directly in Gargan's path, wearing his new suit. "I've been waiting for this for years, Parker!" Gargan roars. "I'm gonna rip you in half!" Gargan lunges forward with insane speed. He thrusts the tail directly at Peter's chest, aiming to impale him. In the past, Peter would have vaulted over the tail at the last possible second, using Gargan's momentum against him. This time, Peter just puts his hand in his pockets and stands still. The tail strikes. It slams directly into Peter's Infinity Shield. The massive kinetic energy of a multi-ton weapon hitting at insane speed meets the concept of endless space. The tail's forward momentum is halted. The shockwave of the sudden stop shatters the windows of the surrounding buildings. But Peter doesn't move an inch. The tail is stuck in midair. Gargan's servos whine, pushing with everything they have, but the tail simply can't move forward. What is this?" Gargan stammers. He swings his fist, but it gets stuck in the invisible barrier too. Peter just sighs. "Mac," Peter says, "you're trying to cross an infinite amount of space. You don't have enough time in the universe to reach me." Peter casually flicks his finger against the tail. Using his enhanced spider strength combined with the force of his new energy, Peter sends the villain flying backward. Gargan crashes through a city bus, knocked out cold by the force of a single flick. Peter webs into a streetlight and pulls out his phone to call the police. A bystander rushes over, hand outstretched. "Spider-Man! Oh my god, are you okay? That was insane!" Peter reaches for the handshake instinctively. His brain fires before he can stop it. Bone density, 1.2 kilograms per cubic centimeter. Radial nerve pathway, optimal pressure point for incapacitation. Peter yanks his hand back. "Sorry, I'm good. Thanks, man. Never mind." The guy looks confused. Peter turns away before the expression on his face has time to stick. Strange's words hadn't found him yet, but the glass box was already being built, one calculation at a time. The first person to figure out what Peter was really capable of wasn't another villain. It was a sorcerer. You can't actively manipulate the fabric of space and reality in New York City without drawing the attention of the master of the mystic arts. Stephen Strange is sitting in the Sanctum Sanctorum when he feels a ripple in the local space-time continuum. It isn't standard magic. It isn't cosmic energy from an infinity stone. It feels like something is taking the laws of geometry and bending them. Strange tracks the anomaly to a rooftop in Queens. He floats down, his cloak of levitation billowing behind him. He finds Peter sitting on a ledge, eating a churro. "Parker," Strange says, "what exactly have you done to yourself?" "Hey sir, just having a snack. Want a piece?" "I don't want a pastry, Peter. I want to know why the reality around your body is folding in on itself. You are generating a spatial paradox. That is incredibly dangerous. Have you been tampering with multiversal artifacts? It's not magic. It's just math and energy. I can see it all now. The multiversal tear did something to my DNA." Strange is skeptical. He assumes Peter's new power is unstable and dangerous. Strange raises his hands, summoning two glowing orange rings. He throws a spell directly at Peter, intending to lock him in a magical chain so he can safely examine him. The magical chains fly towards Peter, and just like the bullets, they slow down and stop in midair, frozen against the Infinity Shield. Strange narrows his eyes. "A spatial barrier," Strange murmurs. "Fascinating. But magic doesn't just rely on physical space, Peter." Strange shifts tactics. He decides to bypass physical reality entirely. He steps forward and throws a palm strike aimed directly at Peter's chest, intending to use the exact same projection technique the Ancient One used on Bruce Banner. He wants to push Peter's soul directly out of his physical body. But Peter isn't a normal human anymore. The Six Eyes detect the flow of astral energy itself. As Strange's magical strike attempts to bypass the Infinity Shield, Peter actually sees the astral energy coming. His body reacts instinctively. Peter floods his own soul with dense cursed energy, anchoring his astral form to his physical body like a lead weight. Strange's palm connects with the barrier, but the astral push fails. Peter's soul doesn't budge. Strange floats backwards, stunned. "You anchored your own astral form? Your processing speed is beyond human. I told you, sir. I can see everything now." Strange decides to escalate. If he can't hit Peter in the real world, he'll change the world itself. Strange punches the air and drags Peter into the mirror dimension. The city around them folds and twists. Buildings rotate upside down. Strange launches a barrage of attacks. He folds the ground beneath Peter's feet and attempts to crush him between two skyscrapers. But Peter understands the geometry of the mirror dimension better than Strange realizes. glasses. Because his six eyes allow him to perceive the atomic structure of energy, Peter actually sees the formula behind Strange's dimension folding before it even happens. Peter raises his hand. He channels his cursed energy, forcing the concept of negative distance into reality. This is Curse Technique Lapse Blue. A blue sphere appears at the tip of Peter's fingers. It acts as a black hole. Peter snaps his fingers, and the blue sphere expands. The buildings Strange threw at him are instantly pulled into the blue singularity. But more importantly, the gravitational pull of blue begins to destabilize the geometry of the mirror dimension itself. The fractal glass of the dimension begins to crack and splinter. Strange realizes instantly that if Peter keeps the blue singularity open, it will shatter the section of the mirror dimension, causing irreparable damage to the magical infrastructure. Stop! Strange commands. They return to the real-world rooftop. Strange looks at Peter with a mixture of awe and deep concern. He realizes that both spatial and non-spatial magic have real limits when they run into this kid. Peter, Strange says softly, I have read ancient texts about beings who achieve this level of spatial dominance. It rarely ends well. He pauses. When nothing can touch you, you stop feeling connected to humanity. You become isolated. This power will alienate you from everyone you love. Peter is quiet for a moment. I know, he says. The first few days, when I put on the blindfold, I felt like I was locked in a glass box. I can see everyone, but nobody can reach me. He looks up at Strange, but I'm not going to let it change who I am. I don't want to be a god. I just want to keep my neighborhood safe. Strange nods slowly. He realizes that if anyone in the multiverse has the moral compass to handle the power of infinity, it's the kid from Queens. What Strange doesn't realize is that the whole conversation was already being analyzed. Somewhere across town, Phineas Mason is watching a grainy long-range recording of the rooftop. He rewinds it. He watches a chain stop. He watches the buildings collapse into the blue singularity. He watches a kid just stand there, hand in pockets, eating half a churro. Mason sets down his coffee and opens a new file on his laptop. The Tinkerer starts taking notes. It doesn't take long for the rest of the heroes to realize that Spider-Man has leveled up. Following the events of Endgame, there's no official Avengers compound anymore. The team is scattered, but they still communicate when massive threats arise. Sam Wilson, the new Captain America, and Bruce Banner are sitting at a secure off-the-book Saber Coordination Center on Earth. On the monitor in front of them is security footage. They watch Peter point one finger at a 5-story building's worth of falling debris during a fire in the Bronx. He calculates the exact output. He fires an invisible blast of repulsive force, Curse Technique Reversal Red, and the falling rubble floats gently to the ground like leaves off a tree. Then he uses short bursts of blue to pull trapped civilians directly out of burning windows, compressing the space between them and the ground, depositing them into his arms safely. Sam watches Peter do all of this in about 8 seconds without breaking a sweat. He backs the footage up, watches it again. Wong, the actual Sorcerer Supreme, is in attendance to provide magical context. Carol Danvers dials in via holographic projection from space. You aren't just a street-level brawler anymore, Spider-Man, Sam Wilson says when Peter arrives. You're operating on a different tier entirely. We need someone with your capability on the global roster. They invite Peter to become a central figure in their new coalition of heroes. Their heavy hitter, the guy they call when an alien armada shows up in orbit. Peter sits at the metal table, wearing his dark glasses. He listens to the full pitch. He respects Sam and Bruce enormously, and then he says no. I appreciate it, guys. Really, I do, Peter says. But if I become your cosmic deterrent, who looks out for the guy getting mugged in Queens? Who stops the car accidents? You guys handle the big global stuff. You fight the intergalactic warlords. I'm staying on the ground. Bruce Banner smiles. He understands the burden of too much power better than almost anyone. We aren't going to force you, Peter, but know that if things get too heavy, you have a support system. Peter nods. He downplays what he's capable of, keeping the other heroes from relying on him too heavily. He wants Sam and the rest to keep protecting the world while he protects his neighborhood. The real reason he said no was the one he didn't mention out loud. Strange's warning hadn't left him. Every hour behind the blindfold, every time he calculated someone's bone density instead of shaking their hand, he felt slightly less human. And the last thing he needed was to stop fighting for people he actually knew. What Peter didn't account for was that the Tinkerer had been watching every second of this too, and Mason had just figured out exactly how to break him. Matt Gargan is not a tactical genius, but Phineas Mason absolutely is. Mason watches all the footage. He analyzes the Infinity Shield from every angle he can find. He figures out quickly that physical violence is completely useless against a new Spider-Man. If you can't kill the hero, you break his spirit. You force him into an impossible situation. Mason and Gargan orchestrate a coordinated terrorist attack across 3 different boroughs of New York City simultaneously. They use modified, stolen damage-controlled drones and repurposed dark tech to rig the Brooklyn Bridge with explosives. They derail a subway train filled with passengers in Manhattan, and then they program a fleet of automated combat drones to fire on a crowded outdoor concert in Central Park. They broadcast a message directly to Peter's suit frequency. You think you're untouchable now, bug? Gargan says. Nothing can hurt you, but you can't be in 3 places at once. Let's see how much that fancy shield helps when the people you love are bleeding out. Gargan expects panic, but he severely underestimates what a genius teenager can do with 6 eyes and the limitless technique. Peter doesn't panic. He floats above the city. He pulls his blindfold down. The sensory input is agonizing. His nose starts bleeding immediately, but he needs the raw processing power for what he's about to do. He looks at the entire city simultaneously. He calculates the exact distance between the Brooklyn Bridge, the subway tunnel, and Central Park. He processes the speed of the falling train, the timers on the explosives, and the flight paths of the stolen drones all at once. Satoru Gojo used short-range teleportation by compressing space. Peter decides to push the boundaries of physics to the absolute limit. planet. He uses Blue to compress the space between himself and the Brooklyn Bridge. He instantly teleports to the bridge. He doesn't waste time disarming the bombs manually, containing the blast radius entirely. The bombs detonate, but the explosion is trapped inside the void. Less than a second later, he teleports to the subway tunnel. The train is tipping off the tracks. Peter uses a perfectly calibrated red blast to push the train back onto the rails, stabilizing the heavy metal cars with sheer force. Finally, he teleports to Central Park. The damage control drones are firing energy rounds into the crowd. Peter drops from the sky and expands his infinity shield to cover the entire concert venue. A dome of space forms over thousands of people. The energy blasts hit the dome and freeze in midair. He did all of this in less than 2 seconds. Gargan is standing on a nearby rooftop, holding a detonator, watching his entire master plan disintegrate. He is absolutely speechless. He thought he could outsmart the kid. He thought he could break him. Peter teleports directly in front of Gargan. "You're right, Mac," Peter says. "I can't be in 3 places at once. But when I can erase the distance between them, it really doesn't matter." Peter casually crushes a detonator, webs Gargan up, and leaves him for the police. But even as he swings away, he realizes something unsettling. He just covered a city grid the size of a dozen neighborhoods in under 5 seconds without breaking a sweat. And the thought that follows isn't pride. It's a quiet, terrifying question. How much further does his power go? Peter tries his hardest to avoid using lethal force. He's still Spider-Man. He believes in second chances. But eventually, the universe throws a threat at him that cannot be reasoned with, punched or webbed up. At the end of No Way Home, a tiny piece of the Venom symbiote was left behind in a bar in Mexico. Over the next few months, that alien biomass grows, multiplies, and eventually makes its way to New York. It doesn't bond with a single host. It creates a hive mind cluster of Clintar symbiotes. Thousands of black liquid alien parasites swarm out of the sewers, bonding with civilians and wildlife, turning them into violent monsters. The military tries to contain the symbiotes, but their bullets just get absorbed by the alien biomass. The swarm starts marching towards the heart of Manhattan. If they reach the dense population centers, the entire city will be assimilated in hours. Peter stands alone on the George Washington Bridge, watching the massive tide of black sludge rolling towards him. He runs the calculations. Webs won't work. Punching them won't work. Red and blue will just scatter the symbiotes, allowing them to reform and attack elsewhere. He has to erase the biomass from existence to save the city. He has to use the ultimate extension of the limitless technique. But Peter doesn't raise his hands yet. He stands there for a moment that feels like much longer than it is. The Six Eyes are showing him something he doesn't want to see. The symbiote hive isn't an army with a plan. It's a biological organism responding to fear and hunger. It's confused by this reality. It didn't choose to be here. The individual creatures that make up the swarm, they're just alive, in the way that all living things are alive, doing the only thing they know how to do. Some of the bonded hosts at the edge of the swarm are still fighting it. He can see their bodies tensing against the black mass covering them. This isn't a clean situation. There's no clean option. He raises his right hand and forms a sign for blue. The black hole forms, vibrating with intense magnetic energy. He raises his left hand and forms a sign for red. The bright red sphere of repulsive energy flares to life. The Six Eyes process the exact atomic composition of the symbiote swarm. Every organism, every host, every lost terrified piece of alien biology that never asked to end up on a bridge in New York. "I'm sorry," Peter whispers. He claps his hands together. The collision creates imaginary mass, a force that simply erases whatever it touches from reality. This is hollow purple. A massive sphere of blinding purple energy erupts from Peter's hands. It doesn't explode like a standard bomb. It moves forward in a perfect straight line. The purple sphere carves a trench through the bridge and the river below. It hits the symbiote swarm. There's no sound. There's no physical struggle. The alien biomass doesn't burn or melt. It is simply deleted from the fabric of reality. The hollow purple goes entirely through the swarm, soaring up into the atmosphere and disappearing into deep space, leaving a circular trench in the ground where the aliens used to be. Peter drops to his knees on the bridge. He's exhausted, but more than that, he's psychologically terrified. He just erased thousands of living organisms from existence in a fraction of a second. He looks at his hands. He realizes that he holds the power to vaporize the entire planet if he makes a mistake, or if he decides to. That's the part that scares him. This is where the story reaches its emotional core. Satoru Gojo embraced his power. He walked around with supreme arrogance because he knew nobody could touch him. He accepted the deep isolation of being the strongest. He turned his untouchability into a personality. But Peter Parker is built on love. He's built on human connection. The realization that he is now a walking weapon of mass destruction sends him into a deep depression. He stops taking off his blindfold. Even when he's alone in his apartment, he's terrified of accidentally activating his powers. He stops answering texts. He tells himself it's temporary, that he just needs time to recalibrate. But the hours turn into days. One rainy evening, MJ climbs a fire escape and knocks on his bedroom window. Peter unlocks it and lets her in. "You've been avoiding us," MJ says. "You didn't show up to decathlon practice. You aren't answering your texts. Now thinks you're mad at him." "MJ, I can't be around you guys right now. It's too dangerous. You don't understand what my brain is doing. Every second I look at you, I calculate the exact force it would take to—" He stops. He starts again. "I have to force the universe to keep you safe. I'm a monster." MJ walks over to him. She doesn't hesitate. She reaches out and grabs his hand. She doesn't let go. "You aren't a monster, Peter," MJ says. "You're a math nerd who got too much power, but you're still the exact same guy who cried during the Sad Dog movie last year. Power doesn't change who you are. You change who you are. Peter is quiet for a long time. See, Strange was actually describing Gojo, not him. Gojo was isolated because he looked down on everyone else, but Peter doesn't look down on anyone. He sees the fragility of human life, and it makes him want to protect it more, not less. The glass box isn't something that Power built around him. It's something he'd been constructing himself, one refusal at a time. Isolation is a choice. Over the following weeks, Peter completely rethinks his approach to the Six Eyes. He doesn't try to suppress the power or run from it. He trains his brain to treat it the way he treats his spider sense, as a tool with the threshold, instead of keeping the Infinity Shield active at all times and letting it read every person around him as a potential physics problem. He trains himself to only filter for actual threats. The rest of the world he learns to just see. He and Ned grab lunch. He doesn't calculate anything. He just eats a sandwich. It takes work, but it's the most important kind of work he's ever done. But Peter doesn't need cursed energy to become unstoppable. What if the biggest change wasn't his abilities, but his biology? Here's a short version. Peter's father, Richard Parker, was a Viltrumite deep cover agent assigned to Earth. He went native. The Empire executed him for it, and assumed his son died with him. They were wrong. For the first 14 years of his life, Peter Parker is a completely normal kid. He's slightly asthmatic, a little too small for his own good, and he has no idea that he's carrying alien genetics in every cell of his body. Viltrumite DNA often requires a massive physical catalyst to actually wake up and override its human counterpart. This catalyst happens on a high school field trip to Oscorp. When the radioactive spider bites Peter, it doesn't just transfer arachnid abilities. The venom attacks his nervous system. His body panics. To survive the lethal radiation, Peter's dormant Viltrumite DNA boots up, rapidly rewriting his cellular structure to keep him alive. He wakes up the next morning feeling completely different. His vision is perfect, his asthma is gone, and when he accidentally rips his bedroom door clean off its hinges, he understands immediately that this wasn't just a spider bite. He still has a spider sense. He can stick to walls, but his baseline physical stats are not just enhanced. He isn't lift a car strong. He could probably punch a hole through Earth without bruising his knuckles. So he designs his web shooters, sews a cheap suit, and hits the streets as Spider-Man. His biggest daily struggle isn't the criminals, it's the restraint, because even if he punches a mugger at 10% of his actual strength, he'll take the guy's head clean off. Every single fight is a masterclass in control. Every single night is an exercise in holding back. And he has to, because the alternative is something he can't come back from. Tony Stark sits in the Parker family living room and shows Peter the grainy YouTube video footage of him stopping a speeding car from hitting a bus. But in this timeline, the footage looks slightly different. When Peter catches a car, he doesn't just skid backward. He plants his feet. The entire front half of the 3-ton vehicle crumples into a flat sheet of metal against his palms. "You've got a heavy catch, kid," Tony says, studying Peter very carefully. "My scanners couldn't even get a proper read on your bone density. What exactly are you made of?" Peter just shrugs. "I eat a lot of protein, Mr. Stark." Tony recruits him for the airport battle in Germany. He gives him a new suit, advanced AI named Karen, and one very clear instruction: keep your distance, web them up, don't engage Cap in a fistfight. Peter steals Steve's shield exactly like he did in the original timeline. But when the combat escalates, the disparity becomes impossible to ignore. Bucky Barnes throws a punch aimed directly at Peter's chest. Peter catches it, but he doesn't realize how fragile vibranium weave and titanium actually are compared to Viltrumite density. When Peter squeezes Bucky's fist to hold him in place, the sound of tearing metal echoes across the tarmac. The hydraulic servos in Bucky's arm rupture. Bucky drops to his knees, screaming in shock, as his arm crumbles under the grip of a 15-year-old kid. Sam Wilson swoops in to help. Peter leaps backwards. His Viltrumite flight hasn't fully activated yet, so he relies on his legs. He jumps so hard that he leaves a smoking crater in the runway concrete, launching himself 300 feet straight up. Tony watches from the sky. "Boss," Friday warns, "the kid's kinetic energy profile doesn't match standard enhancements. If he actually hits someone, the blunt force trauma will be instantly fatal." Tony realizes he didn't bring a street-level hero to this fight. He accidentally recruited a walking weapon of mass destruction. He immediately pulls Peter out of the melee, tells him to web people to the floor, and nothing else. Peter complies. He's ashamed that he hurt someone, more afraid of himself than he's ever been. Tony files that fear away. He doesn't say anything, but he doesn't forget it either. After the Civil War fight, Peter returns to Queens. He goes back to high school. He goes back to Ned asking him if he can summon spiders. Back to trying to act normal around MJ, while his entire body is slowly rewriting the laws of physics. This is where the psychological weight of being a Viltrumite starts isolating him. Ned catches him on the ceiling one day and asks all the classic questions. "Can you lay eggs? Do you have venom?" Peter sits on the edge of his bed, staring at his hands. "Ned, I stopped a runaway train yesterday by standing in front of it. It didn't even hurt. I feel like my skin is made of solid steel. I'm terrified I'm gonna kill someone." His entire arc in Spider-Man Homecoming shifts completely. He isn't trying to prove to Tony Stark that he's strong enough to be an Avenger. He's trying to prove to himself that he's gentle enough to be a human being. Adrian Toomes, the Vulture, isn't even a physical threat to Peter. The Chitauri tech Toomes carries is genuinely dangerous, but an alien blaster rifle against Viltrumite skin feels like a warm afternoon. The climax plays out in the abandoned warehouse. Toomes uses his mechanical wings to destroy the support pillars. A massive concrete roof drops directly onto Peter. In the original timeline, this is the lowest moment. Peter's trapped, crying, forcing himself up through pure willpower. Here, the roof collapses. A cloud of dust fills the warehouse. Toomes turns to leave. The concrete slab shatters from underneath. Peter stands up, completely unharmed. Not a scratch. Toomes stares at him. He raises his Chitauri blaster and fires a plasma blast directly at Peter's chest. Peter doesn't even bother dodging. The blast deflects off of him into the ceiling. Peter walks forward. He doesn't say a word. He grabs Toomes' enormous mechanical wings and plants his feet. With one casual motion, he rips them clean off the harness. He sets the millions of dollars of alien technology on the floor like he's putting down groceries. He grabs Toomes by the collar, webs him to the wall, leaves him for the police. He had the power to rip a man apart. He chose not to. Every single time, he actively chooses not to. I mean, he's Spider-Man first. He just doesn't know yet that the universe knows his name. Okay, so you can't have a Viltrumite living on a planet without the Empire eventually finding out. Shortly after the Vulture's arrest, the residual energy signatures from Peter's power spikes reach the right sensors. The Empire recognizes the specific kinetic output of their own genetics. They don't send an army, they send one person. In this timeline, Nolan Grayson isn't Mark's dad. He's a high-ranking Viltrumite commander assigned to investigate the anomaly in Sector 4. Peter is sitting on the edge of the Chrysler building, eating a sandwich and texting MJ. His spider sense suddenly flares harder than it ever has fired in his entire life. It isn't warning him about a mugger or a falling piece of debris. It's screaming at him that an apex predator just entered his airspace. Before Peter can even turn around, a sonic boom shatters the glass of every surrounding skyscraper. A man in a red and white uniform drops out of the sky and lands silently right next to him. Nolan looks the kid up and down. "You're Richard Spawn," he says. "I can smell the defect in your blood. You're half human." Peter drops his sandwich. "Who are you?" Nolan hovers in midair. "I am Omni-Man. I'm a Viltrumite. And judging by the fact that you're wearing a costume and eating processed garbage on a roof, Richard didn't live long enough to teach you what you actually are." This is a moment Peter's entire world shatters. Nolan doesn't soften a single syllable. He explains the Viltrumite Empire. He explains how they expand across the galaxy, cleansing weak planets, bringing order through violence. He tells Peter the truth about his father, that Richard was one of their best soldiers, that he was assigned to Earth, spent too long amongst the humans, and made the mistake of choosing them over the Empire. That the execution squad they sent wasn't personal. It was simply procedure. "You aren't a spider, boy," Nolan says. "You're a Viltrumite. You have the potential to live for thousands of years. You could snap this entire city in half with your bare hands. Why are you wasting your time stopping petty thieves?" Peter stares at him. He thinks about Aunt May. He thinks about MJ's face and Ned's laugh. "Because it's the right thing to do," Peter says, his voice shaking. Nolan actually laughs. "Human morality is a disease. It makes you weak. The Empire is coming to this planet, Peter. We will take it. We will civilize it. I am giving you one chance. Reject this human identity. Return with me to Viltrum. Learn how to be a conqueror, or stay here and die with the rest of these insects." Peter doesn't hesitate. He shoots a web directly at Nolan's chest. "Get off my planet." Nolan reaches down, grabs the webbing, and snaps it like a thread. He looks at Peter with something close to disappointment. "You'll learn. I'll be back when the invasion begins. Let's see if your human friends are still alive when the dust settles." He shoots straight up, breaks the sound barrier, and disappears into the atmosphere in about 2 seconds. Peter is left alone on the roof, terrified, holding half of a sandwich, knowing for the first time in his life that the threat heading for Earth is something really dangerous. This one requires everything. Before the Viltrumite Empire can mount their invasion, the universe decides to have its own crisis. When the Black Order hits New York in Avengers Infinity War, Peter is on the school bus watching a massive Q-ship block out the sun over Manhattan. His spider sense is going absolute haywire. He's off the bus and in the suit before the bus even stops moving. He joins the fight with Iron Man and Doctor Strange, but Peter has already met Nolan. He knows what he's actually capable of now. He stops holding back quite so much. When Cull Obsidian swings his hammer at Iron Man, Peter doesn't just catch the weapon. He punches Cull Obsidian dead in the chest. The alien brute, who is enormous, ancient, and built for war, gets sent flying 4 city blocks, crashing through 3 office buildings before landing unconscious in a pile of rubble. Tony stares at Peter for a long moment. This is what he'd been afraid of since Germany. He'd known something was different about this kid. He just managed to convince himself it was manageable. He's no longer convinced. "Kid, what did you just do?" "I've been working out, Mr. Stark," Peter says. When Ebony Maw captures Doctor Strange and climbs into space, Peter grabs onto the ship. The air thins. Then it disappears entirely. In the original timeline, Peter passes out and needs the Iron Spider suit to survive the vacuum. Viltrumites can hold their breath for weeks. They can survive in open space. Peter clings to the hull, completely conscious, watching the Earth shrink beneath him. He watches Queens disappear into the blue. In the back of his mind, he has a thought. If Nolan shows up while this is happening, while Tony and Strange are chasing a comet across the solar system, there's nobody left to stop him. He ignores it for now. He focuses. Tony arrives. Peter climbs into the ship, and Tony stares at him, confused and shocked. They retrieve Doctor Strange immediately. It's no problem in this timeline. They travel to Titan to confront Thanos. And here is where the power dynamic of the entire MCU shifts. Thanos is one of the most dangerous beings alive. He's ruthless, ancient, and a military mind that's been sharpened across thousands of conquests. But he has never once fought a Viltrumite Viltrumite combined with a precognitive spider sense. The battle on Titan begins. The Avengers execute their plan to pull the gauntlet off. Thanos breaks free and starts tearing through the team, knocks out Drax, destroys Tony's armor, cuts through Strange's constructs like wet paper. He steps forward, raises the Infinity Gauntlet. He's going to crush Tony's skull. Peter moves, not on a web. He launches himself through the air at Viltrumite speed, breaking the sound barrier, and slams directly into Thanos. The kinetic force of a Viltrumite hitting at Mach 3 hits Thanos like a meteor strike. Thanos is thrown backward into the wreckage of a Titan starship. He stands up, touches his lip, looks at the blood on his fingers. A teenager in a spandex suit just drew blood from the Mad Titan. For the first time in 1,000 years of war, Thanos changes his plans mid-fight. The first exchange, Peter dodges. He's inside Thanos' guard before the gauntlet finishes its arc. The second exchange, Peter delivers a right hand that sends a shockwave rippling across the ruins of Titan. The third, the fourth, the fifth. Thanos tries to adapt, tries to find the gap, tries every counter in a millennium of combat experience. Peter's spider sense sees all of it before it happens. 5 exchanges later, Thanos has not landed a clean hit. He uses the Reality Stone. The ground beneath Peter warps, wrapping around his legs, trapping him in solid bedrock. Before Peter can rip himself free, the Space Stone activates, and the gravity around Peter's body multiplies. Thousands of tons of atmospheric pressure crush down on him from every direction. Even if Viltrumite needs leverage to fight, Peter is pinned, compressed, and he's totally done. Peter is strong, but remember, he still doesn't have much combat experience. At the end of the fight, he gets outwitted by Thanos. Thanos gets the Time Stone. He goes to Earth. He snaps his fingers. On Titan, Peter watches Tony's team start to dissolve. He looks down at his own hands. Viltrumite DNA is resilient, extraordinarily resilient. It fights the Infinity Stones, regenerating constantly, refusing erasure, burning itself out in the process. He collapses into Tony's arms. It feels like he's being deleted from the inside. Mr. Stark, Peter gasps. His healing factor is turning itself inside out to keep him here. I don't want to go. But 6 stones is 6 stones. This was the will of Thanos. Eventually, the Viltrumite genetics fail. Peter Parker turns to ash. Tony Stark is alone on a dead world. The only reason Thanos wins this fight is because Peter is still mentally holding back. He hasn't seen Tony Stark die yet. He hasn't seen what Thanos can really do. In fact, Thanos winning is the catalyst for what comes next. In any other scenario, Spider Viltrumite should win. Even with Thanos having 4 Infinity Stones, MCU Thanos is much weaker, but due to Peter's inexperience, Thanos has the upper hand. 5 years later, the blip reverses. Peter comes back. He fights in the Battle of Earth. He watches Tony Stark put on the gauntlet and erase Thanos and his entire army from existence. And then he watches Tony die for it. In the aftermath, Peter is destroyed. He lost his mentor. He lost 5 years. He's still 17 in a world that aged around him. And he's been carrying the Viltrumite secret entirely by himself since that afternoon on the Chrysler Building. He goes back to high school, tries to rebuild normal with Ned and MJ, tries to sleep, tries not to think about the worship that he knows is coming. MJ figures it out the way MJ figures everything out, by paying attention when everyone else doesn't. She corners him on the roof of his apartment building one evening. In this timeline, MJ finds out sooner, due to Peter's differing behavior because of his Viltrumite genetics. Peter, you're acting weird. What aren't you telling me? Peter breaks. He tells her everything. The Viltrumite Empire, Nolan's visit, he's Spider-Man, the entire Avengers fight, what his father actually was. He expects her to step back. He expects her to look at him like he's crazy. MJ walks over. She grabs his hand. She opens her mouth to say something. Peter's spider sense flickers. Just for a moment. It's so faint that he almost misses it. It's like a distant frequency, a signal from something very far away. He shakes his head. Probably nothing. What were you going to say? He asks. She reaffirms him that she's there for him, that she's proud of him, that he was never really a good liar. After that, Peter gets 3 weeks of normal. Then the sky changes. A month after Tony Stark's funeral, the sky above New York City darkens. A massive Viltrumite warship descends through the clouds and hovers directly over Manhattan. It doesn't fire a single weapon. 3 figures drop from it, landing in the middle of Central Park. The 3 characters are Nolan, General Craig, and a female Viltrumite warrior named Anissa. The remaining Avengers mobilize. Sam Wilson as the new Captain America, Doctor Strange, Smart Hulk, Captain Marvel. They arrive on scene and form a line. General Craig steps forward. He looks at them like he's done this a million times. Your strongest warriors are dead. Your planet is unprotected. By the decree of the Viltrumite Empire, Earth is now our property. Surrender unconditionally, and you will be allowed to serve. Resist, and we will erase your cities within hours. Before Sam can respond, a blur drops out of the sky and lands perfectly between the Avengers and the Viltrumites. Peter Parker stands up. He isn't wearing the Iron Spider suit. He's in his original suit, the handmade one. The choice is deliberate, and everyone who understands it can see exactly what he's saying. Nolan looks at him. I told you I'd be back. Have you finally accepted reality? Are you ready to put on the uniform and claim your birthright? Peter locks eyes with them. Actually, I thought you'd be back sooner. Thanks for giving me time to prepare. Anissa laughs. She steps forward, looking at Peter like he's something mildly interesting on the pavement. You let a half-breed talk to you like that, Nolan? Let me kill him. It'll be a good lesson for the locals. Nolan tells her to wait. He responds to Peter. We were gonna be here sooner, but Thanos destroyed half of our population. We were already sparse, a mere 50 Viltrumites, and after that, only 25 of us remained. Grag was turned into dust. For 5 years, Viltrum was chaos. We could have used you, Peter. Anissa yells at Nolan. What are you doing? There's no point explaining this to him. She ignores the Avengers entirely. She lunges directly at Peter, fist pulled back, aiming to punch straight through his chest. But Peter isn't just a Viltrumite. He has the spider sense. He senses her trajectory perfectly. He doesn't block. He ducks completely under her punch, plants his hands in the grass, and delivers a double kick directly into Anissa's stomach. The shockwave knocks every surrounding tree flat. Anissa skips backwards across Central Park, leaving a trench in the ground. General Craig's eyes go wide. This isn't a weak half-breed. The Avengers stare at the kid from Queens. He just physically overpowered a cosmic conqueror in about 2 seconds. I'm not asking nicely, Peter says. Get off Earth. What follows is the most violent physical confrontation in the history of the MCU. It makes the Battle of Wakanda look like a parking ticket. Craig and Nolan launch themselves at Peter simultaneously. The Avengers try to assist, and immediately discover they are outclassed by Viltrumite combat physics. Hulk swings at Craig. Craig catches his fist and hurls the green giant 2 miles across the city. Doctor Strange opens a portal at the last second, catching the Hulk above the Hudson before it lands on a bridge. Then he immediately snaps back into casting massive shield constructs to protect the civilian population from the sonic booms alone. Captain Marvel engages Anissa in the upper atmosphere, trading energy blasts for raw physical power. They're actually almost equal. Peter fights Nolan and Craig in the air alone. They move at supersonic speeds. They crash through the upper floors of the empty skyscrapers. Their bodies tear through the steel beams and reinforce concrete without losing pace. Peter uses his spidey sense to stay half a step ahead, reading trajectories before they resolve, ducking and countering in the fraction of a second that Viltrumite speeds allow. Then, Nolan lands a right hook across Peter's jaw that gets through. Peter's head snaps back. He spits blood. Craig follows with an axe kick that sends Peter plummeting towards the streets below. He hits the asphalt hard enough to leave a crater. He gets to his feet. His suit is destroyed, and 2 of his ribs are fractured. Viltrumite healing is fast, but it's not instantaneous. Nolan floats down and hovers a few feet above him. You're fighting your own nature, Peter. You have our strength, but you fight like a human. You pull your punches. You worry about the buildings and the people. We don't care about any of that. That is why you will lose. Peter wipes the blood from his mouth. He looks up. You're right, Peter says. I do care about them, but that doesn't make me weak. It means I have something to fight for. He also has something else. A genius-level brain and a very specific piece of knowledge from the Invincible Universe's own lore. Peter fires 2 streams of web fluid directly into Nolan and Craig's eyes simultaneously. It doesn't hurt them, but it blinds them for 2 seconds. Peter uses those 2 seconds with surgical precision. He doesn't try to kill them. His no-kill rule even extends to evil Viltrumites. Instead, he rockets towards Craig and delivers a rapid-fire series of pinpoint strikes directly to Craig's inner ears. Viltrumites have extraordinarily sensitive inner ear structures. It's the biological equipment that lets them maintain equilibrium during high-speed flight. Peter shatters Craig's equilibrium in about 4 hits. The general's flight path destabilizes immediately. He loses balance, spirals, and crashes hard into the streets below, clutching his head in absolute agony. Nolan rips the webbing from his eyes. He is genuinely enraged, which, for someone who has spent hundreds of years mastering his emotions for battlefield advantage, is itself a vulnerability. You little freak! He throws a lethal punch aimed directly at Peter's skull. Peter's spider sense fires. He waits until the last possible millisecond. He dodges right, grabs Nolan's extended arm, and uses every ounce of Nolan's own massive forward momentum to slam his face first into the concrete. Then, Peter pins him. He pulls his fist back, and for the first time in his entire life, Peter Parker doesn't hold back. He channels everything, every year of restraint, all the grief over Tony, all the fear of MJ and Ned and Aunt May. Every single night he spent holding back because he was afraid of what he was. He delivers one strong punch to the back of Nolan's head. The shockwave is felt 6 blocks out. Nolan is completely unconscious. Peter stands up. He's breathing hard. His hands are shaking, surrounded by ruined streets and defeated conquerors. Captain Marvel drops out of the sky and deposits an unconscious Anissa next to Craig. She looks at Peter. She doesn't have words. The rest of the Avengers land around him. None of them have words either. They're looking at a teenager in a destroyed homemade suit who just saved the planet through stubbornness. When Nolan Grayson wakes up hours later, he's in a specialized vibranium holding cell inside the new Avengers facility. His healing factor has repaired his skull. Peter walks in wearing his normal clothes. Flannel shirt, jeans. He looks like a kid who should be worrying about a chemistry test. Nolan sits up slowly. You beat us. You won the battle, but you can't win the war. The Empire will send 100 ships. They will burn this planet to glass. Peter crosses his arms. Let them come. You came here expecting to find humans. You found me. I'm sending you back to your Emperor with a message. Earth is under my protection. If you come near my city, my friends, or this planet again, I will dismantle every last one of you piece by piece. Nolan stares at him. He thinks about Richard, his old mission partner, the soldier who spent too long among humans twins, and made the exact same choice, and was executed for it. He thinks about Richard's face on the day he was reported gone. He thinks about the fact that Richard's son is still standing in front of him. He doesn't know what to do with that. For the first time in hundreds of years of absolute certainty, Nolan Grayson is genuinely confused. He still thinks Peter is stupid. Of course, Thrag will eventually come, and that fight will go a little differently. But for now, Peter turns and walks out of the cell. Somewhere, 100,000 light years away, a warship receives a signal. It turns around. Peter Parker is already on the subway home, worrying about a chemistry test. But becoming stronger doesn't always guarantee a better ending, especially when Peter's next upgrade arrives just before the Avengers face their greatest threat. I thought it made me better. I just wanted to be strong enough. I'm sorry, Mr. Stark. That's the last thing Peter Parker says before the symbiote turns to ash around him, and he disappears through Tony Stark's fingers on the surface of Titan. But here's the thing. That version of Peter, the one who snaps wrists, dangles criminals off buildings, beats Ebony Maw into the floor of an alien spaceship, and then lets go of Thanos' arm to attack Star-Lord, that's not the Spider-Man who shows up in Infinity War. That's what Spider-Man becomes when he's infected with a symbiote in Avengers Infinity War. What if Peter Parker bonds with the Venom-style alien symbiote in the months before Avengers Infinity War? How does it change the battles in New York and on Titan? And how does it lead to a completely different version of the snap? One that's arguably far more tragic than the original. This isn't just a story about a new cool costume. It's a tragedy about a kid who gets everything he ever wanted, only to realize that raw power cannot stop the inevitable. Let's get into it. To make this work, we have to establish exactly how Peter gets the symbiote and what it does to him before Thanos ever shows up. We place the discovery a few months after the events of Homecoming. Peter is back to his normal routine. School, homework, Ned, petty crimes in the red and blue suit. But deep down, he feels a growing frustration. He turned down Tony Stark's offer to officially join the Avengers, but every night he sits on a quiet rooftop watching the news. He sees the global threats. He remembers the alien army from a few years ago. A part of him wonders if he made a mistake by staying close to the ground. He wonders if he'll actually be strong enough when the real monsters finally show up. One night on patrol, Peter spots a group of thieves robbing a Department of Damage Control truck, the kind that hauls alien tech collected from past battles. He takes them out easily, webbing them to the side of the truck. But during the fight, one of the secure crates gets damaged and breaks open. Inside a cracked glass container, there's a pool of thick, moving black liquid. It doesn't look like technology, it looks alive. The crate is marked with a shield evidence tag from 2012. Whatever this thing is, someone collected it from the Battle of New York, and nobody has opened it since. When Peter reaches his hand out to inspect it, the liquid suddenly lunges. It wraps tightly around his hand, crawls up in his arm, and covers his entire body. The red and blue is gone. In its place, a black suit with a large white spider symbol on the chest. The physical upgrade is immediate and overwhelming. The suit generates its own organic webbing, his strength goes through the roof, his spider sense becomes something sharper and more aggressive. But the physical changes aren't the only story here. The story is what happens to Peter's mind. The symbiote is a living creature, and it survives by feeding on the adrenaline and emotions of its host. Peter is a teenager filled with hormones, anxiety, and a desperate need to prove himself. The symbiote latches onto those specific feelings and amplifies them. It takes his normal teenage frustrations and turns them into pure anger. He stops pulling his punches. In the past, he'd web a mugger to a wall and leave a funny note for the police. Now, when a thief pulls a weapon, Peter grabs his arm and snaps his wrist. He dangles criminals off the edges of tall buildings, holding them by one ankle just to hear them scream and beg. The criminals and Queen stop viewing Spider-Man as a friendly hero and start fearing him as a brutal vigilante. The changes leak into his personal life too. He becomes short-tempered with Aunt May. She asks how his day was. He snaps at her and locks himself in his bedroom. He stops answering Ned too, feeling like his best friend is too childish for him now. When Flash Thompson tries to make a joke at his expense, Peter doesn't ignore it. He steps right up to Flash, looks him dead in the eyes, and physically intimidates him until Flash backs down in fear. The symbiote wants to be the only thing he relies on. It feeds on his isolation. It whispers constantly in the back of his mind, making him believe that his old life was weak and that the black suit is the only version of him worth anything. By the time the Black Order arrives in New York, Peter is no longer the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. He's an aggressive powerhouse, totally disconnected from his humanity, just waiting for an excuse to let loose. The events of Infinity War begin when a giant ring-shaped ship appears over New York City. On the ground, Tony Stark, Doctor Strange, Wong, and Bruce Banner step out to confront the two members of Thanos' Black Order, Ebony Maw and Cull Obsidian. In the OG movie, Peter is on a school bus heading over the Queensboro Bridge when his spider sense fires. He asks Ned to cause a distraction, slips out the window, swings towards the danger, and arrives as a helpful kid, catching Cull Obsidian's hammer before it hits Tony, saying a polite hello, spending most of the fight getting thrown around before Tony has to send the Iron Spider armor to save him from suffocating in the upper atmosphere. But in this timeline, Peter's arrival changes the entire dynamic. He's still on the bus, but when his spider sense fires, the symbiote feels the cosmic threat of the Black Order and reacts with hostility. Peter doesn't ask Ned for a distraction. He stands up, ignoring everyone, and jumps straight out the emergency exit window. The black suit flows over his regular clothes before he hits the bridge. He swings into Greenwick Village much faster than he did in the OG timeline. Tony is fighting Cull Obsidian, getting knocked backwards by the giant alien's heavy strikes. Cull winds up his massive hammer and throws it at Tony. A thick line of black webbing catches it in midair. Peter lands in front of Tony, this time with a pitch black suit. He doesn't say, "Hey, what's up, Mr. Stark?" like a nervous kid. He stands perfectly still, staring down the giant alien. Tony looks at him, confused. "Kid, where did you get that outfit? Peter doesn't answer. Cull Obsidian charges. When Cull swings his giant fist, Peter catches it with one hand. He twists the alien's arm, delivers a lightning-fast kick to the chest, and sends the creature crashing through 2 concrete walls. Tony is shocked. He has never seen Peter fight with that much raw power, or that much aggression. Meanwhile, Ebony Maw captures Doctor Strange and floats up towards the ring ship. Tony tells Peter to go after the wizard. Peter launches himself into the sky. He chases Maw up the side of a skyscraper, moving like a dark blur. When Maw throws a piece of sharp glass and metal down at him, the symbiote absorbs the impact without slowing down. As they reach the upper atmosphere, the air gets thin, and in the OG movie, Peter starts suffocating and falls off the ship. Tony deploys the Iron Spider armor to save him, but here the symbiote adapts instantly. The black liquid is not from Earth, so it thickens around Peter's face, generating its own oxygen supply, insulating him from the cold. Tony flies up behind him, preparing to deploy the Iron Spider suit. He calls Peter on the comms, yelling at him to let go of the ship before he runs out of air. But Peter's voice comes through the radio, and it sounds totally different. It's slightly deeper, echoing with a strange double-layered tone. I'm fine, Tony. I don't need your suit. I'm going after the wizard. Tony notices that he doesn't call him Mr. Stark, but before he can argue, Peter punches a hole straight through the metal hull of the Q ship and crawls inside. Iron Man hovers in the atmosphere, deeply concerned. The kid he recruited isn't acting like himself, and this black suit is doing things that defy normal science. He enters the ship behind Peter, realizing he might have to watch the teenager just as carefully as he watches the aliens. And inside the ship, the situation plays out completely differently. In the OG movie, Peter hides in the shadows and waits for Tony. When they meet up, Peter pitches a clever plan based on aliens. Blow a hole in the side of the ship, suck Maw out into the vacuum, rescue Strange. It's smart. It relies on pop culture knowledge and teamwork. But in this timeline, Peter doesn't wait. The symbiote is feeding on his adrenaline, pulsing against his skin, pushing him to act immediately. He looks down at Ebony Maw, and the suit makes him feel like the most powerful thing in the room. Maw is torturing Doctor Strange below. Using floating magical needles, he's trying to force him to surrender the time stone. Strange screams in pain, but Peter doesn't feel terrified seeing a powerful wizard being broken. Deep down, he just feels annoyed that an ugly alien is making so much noise. He crawls along the ceiling silently. The black suit camouflages perfectly with the dark metallic walls. He can literally move like a shadow. Before Maw can look up, Peter drops. He doesn't use a clever movie trick or announce himself with a joke. He shoots 2 thick black strands of webbing, pinning Maw's wrists to the metal floor. Maw can't move his fingers. He can't use his telekinesis. Maw looks up, shocked, but before he can say a word, Peter jumps forward and lands directly on top of him. The symbiote forms hardened knuckles on his gloves, and Peter starts punching. Bone-breaking strength, no hesitation, no holding back. Tony flies into the room expecting to figure out a rescue plan. Instead, he arrives just in time to see Peter brutally attacking one of Thanos' top generals into the floor. Tony raises his repulsors. Kid, back off. That's enough. Step away from him. Peter freezes. He stops, heavily breathing, and slowly turns his head. The white eyes of the black suit narrow into an angry glare. For a brief second, Tony doesn't see the kid from Queens. He sees something hostile in that body language, and it scares him. Tony's shout creates the opening Maw needs. He struggles, frees one hand from the webbing, and uses his telekinesis to rip a sharp piece of metal from the ship's wall. He sends it flying straight towards Peter's exposed back. But the symbiote has its own reflexes. Without Peter turning around, a thick black tendril shoots from his back, catches a spike in midair, and whips it back at Maw. The metal misses Maw's head, but pierces a thin glass hull directly behind him. The vacuum breach still happens, and the air gets sucked out instantly. The rushing wind grabs Ebony Maw and pulls him through the broken glass. He gets sucked into the freezing void of space. Because he's still bound, Doctor Strange starts getting pulled towards the hole too. Peter casually shoots a web, pulling the Sorcerer Supreme to safety, while Tony uses his nanotech to seal the breach. The wind stops, the room goes quiet. Tony walks up to Peter. In the OG timeline, this is the moment Tony officially makes Peter an Avenger, taps him on the shoulder, calls him by name, and genuine pride. Here, there's no knighthood, no pride. Tony looks closely at the shifting, liquid surface of the black suit, watches it ripple and move on its own. What exactly is that thing you're wearing, Pete? His voice is tight with suspicion. Peter stands up straight and crosses his arms. Inside his mind, the suit whispers,
Tony is just have the new power. Tony wants to hold him back. It's just an upgrade.
It's just an upgrade, Peter says coldly, his voice echoing slightly through the mask. I found it. It makes me better. I handled the guy, didn't I? You didn't even have to do anything. Doctor Strange pulls off the alien needles and stands up. He looks at Peter, and his senses immediately pick up on the dark, parasitic nature of the suit. The negative energy radiating off the teenager. That is not a machine, Stark, Strange says quietly. It's alive, and it's feeding directly on the boy's anger and insecurity.
I'm not angry,
Peter snaps back.
I'm just tired of being treated like a helpless little kid.
I saved your life. We have a ship to fly, so let's figure out where we're going instead of worrying about my clothes. The dynamic of this trio is permanently damaged right there. Tony knows Peter's losing his grip on reality. Strange knows there's a dark force controlling the boy, but they're trapped on an alien spaceship speeding towards an unknown world, and they don't have time to argue about a costume. They're heading to Titan, and the worst is still ahead. The ship crashes onto the ruined surface of Titan. Tony, Strange, and Peter survive the impact. As they explore the dusty orange wasteland, the Guardians of the Galaxy ambush them. Star-Lord, Drax, and Mantis, who think they're working for Thanos. This moment matters a lot. The symbiote has been whispering to Peter for months now, but there's still something left of him underneath it. When Drax charges in screaming, waving his knives, Peter feels a flicker of hesitation. These aren't aliens. These guys aren't evil. They're confused, scared creatures who made a wrong call. For half a second, that registers, but the symbiote buries the thought immediately. Peter catches Drax by the throat. Drax is an incredibly strong alien warrior. It doesn't matter. Peter's symbiote enhanced strength is overwhelming. He lifts Drax completely off the ground with one hand and slams him into the dirt, cracking the rocky surface of the planet. Mantis tries to jump onto Peter's back. The symbiote creates spikes on its shoulders, forcing her to back away. Star-Lord flies on his jet boots, blaster aimed at Peter's face. Let him go or I blow your head off. A black tendril shoots from Peter's wrist, wrapping around the blaster. It wraps around the blaster and crushes the metal into pieces. Peter yanks Star-Lord forward and punches him hard in the chest, knocking the wind out of him, sending him crashing into the ground. Tony fires a warning shot into the air. Parker, stand down now. Peter looks at the Guardians groaning on the ground. He slowly retracts the tendrils, but he doesn't apologize. Once they realize they're all on the same side, the group forms a circle to come up with a plan. The tension is thick. Star-Lord is rubbing his bruised chest, looking at Peter like he's a monster. Tony pulls Peter aside while Strange meditates to view his alternate futures. Listen to me very carefully, Tony says, pointing a metal finger at Peter's chest. I don't know what's going on, but this black goo is messing with your head. You're acting like a thug. You're supposed to be better than this. Peter scoffs. The symbiote reacts to Tony's tone, the white spider logo stretching slightly on the suit. I am better than this, Mr. Stark. I'm stronger than I've ever been. You brought me here to fight a war, so let me fight. For half a second, something crosses Tony's face that almost looks like grief. This is not the same kid as before. The kid who turned down the Avengers because he wanted to stay close to the ground. That kid is almost gone. Before Tony can say anything else, Doctor Strange snaps out of his trance. He looked into 14,605 alternate futures. Tony asks how many they win in. 1, Strange says quietly. The sky grows dark. A portal opens. Thanos steps out onto his ruined homeworld, and whatever was left of Peter Parker's hesitation disappears entirely. Thanos arrives holding the Infinity Gauntlet, already carrying the power, space, reality, and soul stones. He explains his plan to Strange. Limited resources, universal balance, the same speech. Tony drops a piece of spaceship on him. The ambush begins. In this timeline, Peter doesn't run the hit and run approach. He lands directly on Thanos' shoulders. The symbiote forms thick black claws that dig into Thanos' purple skin. Peter rains down heavy punches on the Titan's face. Thanos is genuinely surprised by the raw power coming off the boy. He reaches up to grab Peter, but Peter flips over his shoulders, catches the Titan by the arm, and uses everything he has to throw Thanos across the rocky terrain. Tony and the Guardians watch in shock. Peter is actually going toe-to-toe with the most powerful being in the universe. Thanos recovers. His lip starts to bleed. He looks at Peter, recognizing the dark shifting nature of the suit. An interesting parasite, he says, his voice calm and deep. But raw power is nothing without the will to wield it. Thanos closes his fist, activating the Power Stone. A massive wave of purple energy blasts across the battlefield. And this is where the symbiote's weakness finally shows. The Power Stone generates intense heat and extreme sonic vibration, exactly what the symbiote can't handle. The black liquid violently peels back from Peter's face, exposing him to the harsh environment. Peter falls to his knees, clutching his head in agony. He isn't used to feeling pain anymore. The sudden shock leaves him completely vulnerable. Tony flies in to distract Thanos. Drax and Star-Lord rejoin the fight. Strange uses the crimson bands of Cyttorak to bind Thanos' arm. They transition into the next phase, hitting the Titan down, going for the gauntlet. The team works together. Iron Man on his left arm, Drax is on his right leg. Star-Lord drops a gravity mine. Mantis steps onto Thanos' shoulders, using her empathetic powers to force his mind to sleep. Peter shakes off the pain. The symbiote covers his face again, but it's angry now. It's threatened in a way it hasn't been before. Peter shoots massive black cables of webbing to hold Thanos' right arm in place, while Tony strains to pull the gauntlet off. This is the closest they've ever been to winning. Then Mantis feels something. She cries out that Thanos is mourning. Star-Lord asks about Gamora. The answer hits him like a train. Thanos killed Gamora to get the Soul Stone. Star-Lord starts screaming, raises his blaster to hit the sleeping Titan. Tony's already moving, trying to hold him back, begging him to keep it together for 10 more seconds. But Peter doesn't wait for Tony to handle it. The symbiote senses that Star-Lord is about to ruin everything. Driven by pure rage, arrogance, and the dark influence of the suit, Peter decides to eliminate the problem himself. He lets go of Thanos' arm. A black tendril shoots out and wraps tightly around Star-Lord's neck, yanking him violently backwards. Peter throws Quill across the rocks, screaming at him,
Shut up. You're rude again.
At this point, he's sounding more like Venom and less like Peter. But by releasing Thanos' arm, Peter has just made the catastrophic mistake. Tony is left trying to pull the gauntlet off alone. Without Peter's enhanced strength holding the Titan's right arm down, Thanos feels a shift in pressure. Mantis loses her grip on his mind. Thanos' eyes snap open. He doesn't hesitate. He rips his arm right free, grabs Mantis by the head, throws her away. He kicks Drax off his leg. He headbutts Iron Man. The plan is finished. Not because Star-Lord hit Thanos, but because Peter attacked an ally instead of completing the mission. Peter watches in horror as Thanos rises back on his feet. The Infinity Infinity Gauntlet glowing with energy. For the first time since the Venom symbiote attached himself to him, he feels a cold rush of genuine fear. Not of Thanos, of himself, of what he just did. Thanos shatters Titan's moon. A massive rain of flaming meteors crashes down onto the battlefield, and the symbiote hits full survival mode. Intense heat, deafening sonic booms. The suit begins to panic hard, shrinking back, exposing Peter's arm and his face, trying to protect its own core at the expense of the boy wearing it. Peter is left running through the explosions, desperately trying to hold the suit together. He barely survives the meteor shower, but he's exhausted, and he's alone. What he emerges from the rubble to see is the worst thing he has ever witnessed. Tony Stark, alone, fighting Thanos in a one-on-one duel, using every piece of nanotech he has. Shields, swords, thrusters, blocking energy beams, breaking his armor down piece by piece. But Thanos is too strong. He tears a blade of nanotech from Tony's suit and drives it straight through his stomach. Tony falls to his knees. Everything that Peter has suppressed for years, the guilt over Uncle Ben, the fear that he isn't good enough, the thing under the symbiote that still loves the man bleeding out in the dirt, all of it breaks through the surface at once. The suit feels that emotional spike and feeds on it, amplifying it into something monstrous. Peter doesn't use webs. He doesn't make a quip. He screams, a sound that's more animal than human, and launches himself at Thanos. For a few seconds, Peter's pure rage actually pushes Thanos backwards. He punches with enough force to crack the Titan armor. He whips his black tendrils across Thanos' face, blinding him with thick dark slime. But Thanos is not just a brawler, he has the stones. He grabs one of Peter's tendrils, wraps it around his fist, and yanks Peter through the air. The Space Stone, gravity manipulation. He slams Peter face first into the rocky ground with the force of a falling building. Then he steps on Peter's back, pins him down, activates the Power Stone. But this time he focuses the cosmic energy directly on the symbiote. The intense heat and vibrating radiation burn the alien liquid away. The suit screeches, peeling off Peter's skin, retreating into a small useless puddle on the ground. Peter is left exposed, torn civilian clothes, broken ribs. He can barely breathe. He looks up at Thanos from the dirt. "You relied on a parasite to give you strength," Thanos says quietly. "True power requires sacrifice. You have nothing left but your own mind feeding on you." Thanos raises the gauntlet to deliver the killing blow to Tony. Doctor Strange steps forward. He offers the Time Stone in exchange for Tony's life. Thanos accepts. He takes the green stone, places it into the gauntlet, and opens a portal to Wakanda. He leaves them behind. The Battle of Titan is over, and Peter Parker is the reason they lost. The surface of Titan goes eerie and silent. Tony is sitting on the ground, spraying medical foam onto his stab wound, barely conscious. Strange sits on a rock, face pale and unreadable. The Guardians are slowly waking up from the debris. Peter is sitting a few feet away. The symbiote slowly creeps back up his arm, forming a thin, weak layer over his chest. But the power is gone. The suit is exhausted, and Peter is broken. He thinks about Ned, whose calls he stopped answering months ago. He thinks about Aunt May, who asked how his day was and got a door slammed in her face. He thinks about the kid he used to be, the one who turned down the Avengers to help his neighborhood. He doesn't know if that version of himself is still there. On Earth, in the forests of Wakanda, Thor strikes Thanos in the chest with Stormbreaker, but Thanos snaps his finger anyway. The snap echoes across the entire universe. On Titan, it begins immediately. Mantis looks around confused and slowly turns to ash. Drax calls out for Star-Lord before he fades. Star-Lord looks at Tony and says, "Oh man," and turns into dust. Strange looks at Tony, but this time he doesn't say this was the only way. He looks shocked, disappointed, and disappears into the wind. Then it's Peter's turn. He feels a cosmic erasure beginning in his cells. He stumbles forward, looking down at his hands as they start to flake away into gray ash. But the symbiote doesn't want to die. As Peter begins to dissolve, the black suit tries to hold him together. It rapidly shifts and wraps around his fading limbs, acting like dark glue trying to replace the missing cells. It ripples and screeches, fighting against the power of the Infinity Stones. Tony crawls forward, his eyes wide with horror as he watches a boy he recruited fighting the alien suit and the cosmic dusting at the same time. "Just hold on, kid. I got you." He reaches his hand out, knowing it's a lie. He looks at Tony. "I'm sorry, Mr. Stark," Peter whispers. "I thought it made me better. I just wanted to be strong enough. I'm sorry." The power of the snap is absolute. The symbiote cannot fight the Infinity Stones. The black liquid turns to ash right along with Peter's body, the suit and the boy disintegrating together, falling through Tony's fingers, leaving nothing but gray dust blowing across the dead orange rocks of Titan. Tony Stark is left alone, staring at his empty hands. In the OG timeline, Tony Stark carries the guilt of Peter's death because he brought a kid into a war zone. That's heavy enough. But in this alternate timeline, Tony's trauma is infinitely worse. He didn't just watch Peter die. He watched Peter lose his mind to an alien parasite over months. He watched him become aggressive, violent, and arrogant. He watched him attack their own allies and break their one real shot at stopping Thanos. And then, at the very end, he watched the same parasite try and fail to hold Peter's body together as he turned to ash. 5 years later, Tony Stark can't bring himself to come back. And turns out, this is not the one reality where the Avengers win. Maybe it was Peter getting the symbiote. Maybe it was him attacking Star-Lord. Maybe it was Tony's extended grief. For whatever reason, in this universe, Thanos wins, and there's no coming back.